How great, huh? Okay, everybody. Let's get the evening thing going. Thing was the best word I could come up with. All right. Oh, good. Look at the water bearer. There's going to be 5 of us, you know. But I have one, so all we need is one. Oh, there's more. Okay, everybody's good. So you guys, when you come up here, be sure you kick over the water glasses. Okay, all right. And Joe, are there any other announcements right now? No. Okay. So no announcements, except when we're concluded with our panel here, we will have a session out there at the table where we'll all be available to sign a copy of the Localism book, and you can still get that at the at our book table out there. And if you have your copy, all of us who are present will be happy to sign it. So in addition to our panel, the other 3 contributors who are here tonight, Joseph Pierce, Christopher Check, and Daniel Kerr. You didn't actually write anything in this book. Yeah, you can't sign the book. Yeah. Yeah, so you could ask him to sign it, but he shouldn't. All right. He was invited to write something, he just never bothered sending it in. But so a little bit about how this book came about. I want to give just a special thanks to Michael Warren Davis, who happens to be William Fahey's son-in-law, who contacted me and said, I want to do something to help really push distributism in Chesterton's Catholic social teaching. And I said, well, you know, we've come up with a new name for distributism, and it's localism. It's a name that, first of all, you don't have to apologize for, and then you don't have to even explain it because people immediately know what it means, and then all you can just enhance the definition of and how it applies to Catholic social teaching. So between the 2 of us, we contacted all the contributors, but he did most of the work. He really did, including getting Senator Marco Rubio to contribute a chapter. And Senator, he was here a minute ago. But we do have the contributors who are here tonight really do represent a very distinguished bunch of people. And so I'm going to introduce you one at a time so they can, figure out who you are as you come up here, okay? And I'm going to start with the one that when I say his name, you'll be surprised that this is the guy who comes up here. Father Michael Rennier. See? And he is a priest from the Archdiocese of St. Louis, and a Catholic convert. Yeah, good. Oh, yeah, right there. Yeah, I'm gonna do this. Yeah. So and a convert. Be sure to kick over the water. Yeah. And you have extra ways of kicking it over because you're wearing a skirt. So that'd be great. And then. Dr. William Fahey, president of Thomas More College of the Liberal Arts. And he and I will also be on the next panel with the Troubadours. And then Jason Craig, who's the editor of Those Catholic Men and Sword and Spade magazine. Jason Craig. And then Allan Carlson, our token Lutheran, who's the John A. Howard Distinguished Fellow for Family and Religious Studies at the International Organization for the Family, and he's an editor at Touchstone magazine. All right. I said Tombstone. Oh boy. So I am going to be a very moderate moderator. So we want to hear from each of the contributors, and they'll basically quickly rehash what they have written in the book. But then we want to have some sharing of ideas of how we can apply localism and how it does reflect Catholic social teaching and all good things that follow. So we'll start with you, Father.
I think I was initially scheduled for last, but I said, well, I'm a priest, and I need to go first. And I'm going to use the podium because I feel more powerful. At the Oratory of St. Gregory and Augustine, where I'm the vice rector, our pulpit's probably a good 10, 12 feet up. So it's wonderful. I can really harangue the parishioners and tell them just how much they need to shape up, which is what I'm here for. To Cassock, yeah. The anti-Catholicism here is amazing. So at the Oratory, which is in St. Louis, Missouri, we go all out for the Mass. The priests there, we are resplendent in our watered silk, our beautiful vestments, our golden chalices. Everything is top-notch. Everything is the best that we can possibly make it. And we are very happy, the priests there at the Oratory, to reside in sartorial splendor. But before that, about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, in a different life, before I converted, before I was Catholic, I was an arrogant, rebellious young Pentecostal at Oral Roberts University. And, right, yeah, yeah. Feel free to groan, I'll wait a second. It's the buckle of the Bible Belt. And I'm seeing around me all of this consumerism that unfortunately had even infiltrated those Pentecostal circles. There was a lot of teaching about wealth and success. But as a young man who was very arrogant, but also just dangerous enough, all right, to start spouting off, I had read just enough philosophy. I wanted to reject it all. I wanted to reject consumerism, globalism, corporatism. So I became what we all become at some point in our lives, which is a minimalist. I wanted nothing. I desired nothing. I rejected everything. My parents were thrilled about it when I explained to them that all of the stuff they had was of Satan. Right. But what I came to understand as I grew up is that you need some things, especially as you grow into an adult life. You have to have some sort of material possessions of some sort, and that has to be okay. So then we all mature into this next phase of conscious consumerism. I want to be local. I want to shop responsibly. And so I'm going to shop for very, very expensive products at the local farmer's market. And this is the first thing anyone tells me when I tell them I want to explain to them localism or distributism is they say it's too expensive. I can't afford the products at the local farmer's market. I can't shop local all the time, Father. And of course, that is correct. It's very, very expensive, and it's not something that everyone can do. And to make matters worse, if you really think about it, it still is a consumerist mindset. It's thinking, I will shop here instead of shop there. So it's really not quite hitting the heart of, I think, what Chesterton is talking about when he talks about localism and living in harmony with our communities and with our neighborhoods. Chesterton wrote an essay on William Morris. I don't know if you all know who William Morris is. He makes the best wallpaper on planet Earth. The William and Morris Company still exists. A Victorian designer. He was a little off the rails politically, but his heart was in the right place, and he was a genius. He hung out with the pre-Raphaelites a little bit. And what they did is they bought a house called the Red House, or he built it. And to decorate it, he just called all his pre-Raphaelite friends in. He said, let's just decorate it. Build the furniture. They learned to make tapestries. They put tapestries up. They learned to paint. They learned to make stained glass. They did everything themselves for themselves. So this is a localist way of approaching the problem. right? They didn't hire out an expensive firm. They didn't go to the local farmer's market and buy overpriced products. They made it themselves. This is the principle of Gothic architecture, and William Morris was a big fan of this. When he went to Chartres Cathedral, that really changed his perspective, because he saw it and he saw this is a living architecture that is made by the local community, and it is one of the greatest things that has ever been created on planet Earth. And it did not take a corporation, it did not take experts. It just took the local people working on it. And so here we have that great quote that we heard this morning: thrift is poetic, right? This is thriftiness. Let's make it ourselves. It's creativeness. This is creativeness. It's bringing the beauty that God desires to give to us into our homes. And that is the localist answer to consumerism. It is a reconciliation with things, right? Because we do not have to reject things in order to be localist. We do not have to be minimalists in order to be localist. In fact, I would argue it's the opposite. This is a learning to love things and participate in the goodness and beauty of them the way that God intended. So back to our church, the oratory where I serve. Everything there is local. The vestments I wear, they were made by a local homeschooling mother who learned. She put in the work. No one's saying this is easy, but she put in the work. She went on a retreat with the Benedictines in Gower, and they taught her how to make vestments. She practiced, she learned, she improved, and now she makes vestments that are as beautiful as anyone in the world can make. And that's what I wear at the altar. The altar linens are made locally. There's a retired lady who makes all of the altar frontals, the hangings, and the tabernacle veils for me. Our banners, so we have this great procession around the Feast of St. Louis, where I'm from, which is on the 25th. And we like to carry our banners. That's the new trend in Catholicism. So if you don't have your banners yet, go make your banners and process with them because it's wonderful. The banners were made by a 16-year-old girl in our church. And then some of the mothers helped her put the finishing touches on them. And they are beautiful. They are not those banners that the corporations make, which as Catholics you all recognize immediately because they're in every single church. They're lowest common denominator. They're ugly. They do not fit the purpose of worship. But this localist principle, right? This 16-year-old girl who makes it, they are wonderful. The music, the kids learned to sing. The adults have learned to sing. We make it all ourselves. We don't hire it out to professionals. The flower arrangements, some mothers arrange the flowers. This is all a localist endeavor. And it's better for that. It's more beautiful for that. And that's the case also in our homes. So Chesterton tells this story about his father. I think it's in his autobiography, but you all are geniuses at this stuff, so you'll tell me if I'm wrong. Where he talks about how his father would make these things, and he would just kind of make toys for the kids, and he was like a genius at these things. And Chesterton said, you could go to an arts and crafts store. This is the movement that followed on the work of William Morris, the arts and crafts movement, and it was very expensive in these local shops. And he said, we made things better than that in our own home. We could have become rich, right, selling our things that we made at the local store. And so the encouragement here, and this is my chapter, I fixate on beauty and aesthetics and poetics, so I apologize for that, but that's all you're going to get from me, is when we talk about localism, we are talking about making beauty. We are talking about creativity. And these gifts of beauty, they are a gift of beauty to God, because he deserves it. Remember what Chesterton says about Becket, the fancy vestments, the beautiful things are for God and for his worship. Same in the home. The beautiful things that we create in our homes are for God. And that doesn't mean that we can't enjoy them, because remember, God always outgives the giver, and in his hands, thrift becomes a treasure. Thank you.
What happens if I touch the bottom? How's this? All right. That's good? That's good. Thank you, Dale, for inviting me. So Dale is very used to, whenever he invites me to participate in something, and he gives me very clear instructions on what I'm supposed to do, he receives half a dozen tests to see if it's really what he wants me to do. So what am I supposed to do? So I was told I was on a panel, which is probably why I'm not standing. So Dale probably remembered, you're on a panel. Now, to me, a panel is a little bit like the Troubadours. Zero prep, a lot of alcohol, and we're just... Yeah. So, no, Dale said, everyone who's going to be invited should speak about 10 minutes on what they were trying to do, something about the history of the Localism book, etc. And so what I thought I would do, rolling the dice on, I bet no one else will do this, is talk about the prequel to the Localism book, because I was party to that too. So, and it has something to do with my contribution. I don't know if this is still available. I highly encourage that you try to find it. It is still available. So The Hound of Distributism is the prequel to this volume, a sort of anthology of people that Dale and at that time I think Richard Ellman thought, well, these might be interesting folks to get talking on how to represent Chesterton's and Belloc's and McNabb's ideas on distributism. And my contribution there was, even though it was written many years after I first met Dale, it was inspired by his talk. I think it was the first talk I ever heard Dale give, which was, at the time I was teaching at Christendom College. Dale had, Julian I think was there at the time. And I had been involved in something called the Distributist Reading Group, which is like the Catholic Masons. And we would meet on, we would fast every Friday and instead would feast on the readings of Chesterton and Belloc and some other writers. And I had probably spent 2 or 3 years at this point trying to understand myself, explain to students what distributism was. And even more difficult was trying to explain what it was to some of my colleagues and to people in the community in which I lived. And Dale came in to give this talk on, it's just like, what is distributism? Something like this. I thought, oh, this would be great. You know, I've been struggling for several years over this. This is gonna be hilarious. And Dale just came in and said, you know, distributism is just a lousy word. Really, this is the economy of liberty. It's all about freedom. And he just went from there. And I thought, wow, I don't know that I agree with that, but I don't disagree with it either. That's interesting. Maybe there's a way of rethinking and repackaging distributism. That's a good idea. So when I was asked to write a contribution to this volume, I was very much thinking about what Dale had done. What are new ways of talking about distributism? And this was so firing up my mind, I decided, I bet most of my co-authors are going to write prose. So I won't. I'll write a dialogue instead, just on a whim. I had written a number of technical things, scholarly things, whatever, on distributism, and I found them flat. I found they would never really convince people. Constant arguments in circles in politics and economics on distributism. So I'm going to do something different. So I wrote a dialogue. And the reason for that was that I thought the dialogic form represented some of the ideas of Chesterton and Belloc better than prose. It was a better way of getting the reader to have a sense of his own ownership of the ideas by entering into this dialogue. So years later, so the first volume was 2012, something like that. Years later, when Dale prompted my son-in-law, or my son-in-law was in conversation with Dale, for some reason I was asked it again, and I thought, you know what, there are a number of things I never really finished up with. I'd like to continue the dialogue. So if you look at this book, what I am doing there is a conversation between two people. In the first one, it's a conversation fundamentally prompted by Dale on creativity, the relationship between creativity, property, and a good community life. In the second one on localism, the dialogue is, here's the backstory on the dialogue, and this is how I think. I wanted to unpack the following medieval maxim, believe it or not. So the whole dialogue, if you read it, you might think, what? The whole thing is my trying to play out, you cannot love something you don't know. And so my particular take on localism, which I think is a brilliant second way of entering into Chesterton's vision of the good life, of the political life, of the economic life, deals with knowledge. Hopefully this won't kill it for you. Knowledge, time, love, memory. Or to put it another way, imagine you got together Chesterton and Belloc, Frank Capra, Plato, and Christopher Nolan. And you said, you have 30 minutes to write something on distributism. They would have written my contribution to the localism book. Okay? So. It's really well worth reading. Because to me, localism has to do with being sort of embodied creatures. Too much of economics and politics is just too abstract. And even what I'm saying is too abstract. What I'm saying bears no resemblance to what I wrote. It's true. It's just a different approach. I die at so many talks on politics and economics because it's so abstract. I wanted to try to unpack in a way that wasn't abstract this idea that part of localism is coming to accept, not merely understand, but accept the bonds of affection that can only be accepted over time in a specific place. For me, that's localism. Localism is you know a place and you love it, and you can't know it without loving it, and loving it without knowing it, and that takes time and it requires a place. And so the dialogue is between a young lady who is very wounded and very skeptical of all the ideas that most of the people in the room at least would pledge allegiance to, but most of the people in this room know at least a dozen people who don't pledge allegiance to, who are typical modern people who are deeply wounded, have no sense what it means to know a place. And if you say localism, they think maybe it means something like, oh yeah, I buy local. I think global, I buy local, which has nothing to do with localism. Localism requires saying, I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying in this place, and I'm allowing the place and the people of the place to come to know me and accept me and love me, and that's very hard to do, and I will eventually do the same thing. Again, I'll just end with this. That to me almost sounds trite, stupid, or sappy if you just explain it in a prosaic way, which is why I attempted to have a conversation between two people struggling towards those ideas in my little contribution of the localism essay.
So let me get this straight. To make it less abstract, you made up a conversation between fake people?
But the fake people I love.
But he loves them.
No, actually, no. No. The people in neither dialogue are the people fake. So in both dialogues, I got nailed for this, as if it was like a got you moment. Someone who did a review, I think, of the first book said, William Fahey's contribution involves a faux belloc use of scriptor and lector in a dialogue. That's like saying the second person who made a leather chair, it used faux leather. Like, you can't have a dialogue unless... Anyway, so no, both of them, the position of, and many of the things said by scriptor, the writer, are in fact just me, especially in the second one. It's actually very accurate to my situation. The person with whom I am engaged in the first one represents about half a dozen skeptics of distributism that I argued with in public debates, and I distilled their positions into the position of the speaker. In the second essay, the localism essay, it's very much students and people I know that I've tried to talk to about what it means to flourish as a human and have a good life. So and that's a good, I'm glad you raised that, because they're not imaginary. It's not fake.
Dr. Fahey is anything but fake. Nothing. My name is Jason Craig. I'm out of my league up here. I'm pretty sure I got an email that said to prepare about 10 minutes, which I understood to mean wing it. And then Father got up in a cassock, and you couldn't see it behind the podium, but he pulled notes from his sleeve like Elf pulling out syrup. And I thought, great, he's prepared. Thank you for the example, Father. My contribution, like a lot of things, dwelt on, or a lot of things that I'm involved with, dwelt on the role of fatherhood in this idea of localism, because the father, a lot of times right now, the world is trying to reconcile the irreconcilable right now, which is the relationship of men and women. The world is trying to reconcile them through any means possible except the family. So we're navigating the relationships between men and women in every arena that they don't belong in, and fighting. I think literally they're going to have like UFC fighting eventually, except the man will really be a woman and the woman will be a man. We really won't know who wins. Whereas God intended, obviously, the only real reconciling of men and women is in the family. That's really the only place where it happens fully and totally. So we're comfortable saying that, and I just got canceled now. And the reason that when we talk about the roles of men and women, and we say these things, and we as Catholics say these things, and it's actually wrong. We say things like, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom. Or it's better for a woman's role to be a stay-at-home mother to take care of the children. That we've actually accepted all sorts of anthropological presuppositions about what we think the home is for. The home originally did not mean the place that you bring your money back to consume it together. If we understand the nature of the home is to be a place primarily of consumption and amusement, then mom staying at home is mom not actually participating in real active economic activity. So a mother staying at home is actually planting her flag that this is the place of true and authentic and real economic activity, if we understand economics to be household economics. So that there's actually a very traditionalist argument for women following their husbands into the workplace if that's the place of true economy, because she is the helpmate of Adam. There's a good argument. Now, my wife is a stay-at-home mom, but she stays home when she homeschools, which is refunctionalizing the home, making the home a place of something more than consumption and amusement. So if we understand, so once we define the home, and I'm beginning with the home because we talk about localism, it's really impossible if the economics of the household is not aligned towards local economic activity, then we really are just abstract. I don't even know what you paid for to come here. It's really absurd until we understand the definition of the home as being a place of more than consumption and amusement. If that's all it is, then call off the conference, no refunds, let's go home, right? But my contribution was on the role of the father traditionally, that the home itself is economic, and there is a rich dynamic between men and women in running the economics of a home. When the home involves work and production, it becomes much more interesting immediately. I mean, when you know, like, read what's the Proverbs 31 wife, right? This perfect wife. What is she doing all day? Staying at home? No, she's buying fields and putting servant girls to work. So my wife's like, "Where's my servant girls?" And I'll be a Proverbs 31 wife. She's buying fields, she's planting them, she's participating in the economics of an agrarian household. So an agrarian household does stuff, it makes stuff. And Father mentioned, I don't know how you put it, that we make beautiful things. I actually think we can go back that the Catholic culture and localism it's even simpler than that. We make necessary things. And to make the necessary things first allows us to be able to ascend to the higher things quicker, I would say. Just like Wendell Berry in his one of the last collections, The Art of Loading Brush. And I don't know, has anyone read that? You should. Come on, people, you should. Couple guys, 3 guys. Hey, my people. And he's got this grumpy old man yelling at this fence contractor who's not doing it right, and then he has to get this young man to come help him who's a student of composition, music composition. He's the high arts, and he says, "You go back and you tell your professors that until there's masters of the low arts, there will be no masters of the high arts." So the home is a place of order. You know, as Wendell Berry would say, our relationship to the world is work, and our relationship to each other is economy. That's our relation. It's not sociability. This was actually, I think, the Joe's talk at the beginning, like, well, what do we do? It's actually not just choosing one another in some sort of like Facebook friend or unfriend fashion. That's not localism. That's still consumerism. To need one another requires economics. It requires that we actually have some sort of dependency on one another, which is why John Senior in The Death of Christian Culture, when he says the reason people can't rebuild Christian culture is they're actually not willing to be poor. If they were willing to be poor, they would need one another, and as soon as they need one another, they would be in local economics, right? Until then, we're just choosing one another. And I don't know about you, but if everything was based on my willpower to make the right choice, we're never going to be localists. There's a certain economic realism of learning how to need one another again. So my contribution, though, was on the father's role in that is very priestly. The woman's motherly role in the economics of the household is to sort of bring things into coherence, into wholeness within the home. Which is why the only time our Lord refers to himself in the feminine in the Gospels, does anybody remember? Little chicks, I want to bring you in. Like, picture St. Peter's. That's what mama does. Get in here, it's dinner time, is what mama does. And the father, who is plucked out of that wholeness in a priestly way, is a sort of bridge in the economic world of the outside world. It's not to say that's absolute and only men deal with the out, but there are a lot of very good reasons that my wife gathers in and that I am the bridge to the outside world. And so we own a small dairy farm. And in the book, I just talk about, and matter of fact, that dairy farm, and when customers come and go, I am very often the bridge of dealing with those people, and the economics is the bridge. It's not based on whether or not I want to be their friend, right? So when Christopher checked, when he said, you know, there's some people I don't even know their names. It's like, well, we don't know their names because we don't want to know their names because they're potentially a friend. We want to know their name because they already are a brother, right? So I already belong to these people. So during COVID, though, we had a commercial yogurt business, and we were delivering delicious, drinkable yogurt. I was way ahead of Costco on this by like 5 years. and we were selling drinkable yogurts by the case, and then COVID hit, and I was unable to serve milk to my local community because I was driving bourgeois yogurt into Asheville, right, for childless hippies. So we had to recalibrate even our little dairy because we're just making milk, and people want milk, and they need it. And they really need it because they can't get what we sell in the store because what I sell is illegal. It's legal with natural law. We'll just stop there. So the father, is this broadcast? I am just joking. Bird flu is real and I don't own any cows. But the father as sort of a priest economically is something that we don't even talk about. But the fact is that the dominance of the father's work on a household is so culture setting that I would argue that the family without the father's buy-in is going to have a very hard time, and that we, in generations that have recognized how much our work has been abstracted from place and family, ought to work diligently for work. That the family working and making stuff together, and I don't mean be a full-time farmer. That is, I will agree with you, that's unrealistic. But there is a lot of work that can be done, that ought to be done, that serves all sorts of purposes. And it's especially helpful for dads. Right? You need to be a better dad. And he said, fine, what do you want me to do? And the world doesn't have an answer for him. Usually the answer really is be another mom. Like be supportive and work less and spend quality time with your kid. But if you read the Little House books, those dads are working constantly, even when they're sitting at the fire, right? Almanzo, like in Farmer Boy, so there's a scene in Farmer Boy where they're sitting by the fire in this moment of leisure. Someone's reading the newspaper, and I'm like, look at him, sweetie. He's rubbing an axe handle with some glass to smooth it out. He's working right now. He never stops. It's not, the message that we get is all you got to do is work less and spend quality time with your kids. I would argue that's not going to work. That actually the priestly role of fathers to bring their sons and their children into the work that they're doing that's worth doing, the household provides all sorts of ways that can happen if we understand the household as a place of production. So my contribution to the book, to wrap it up, is that just like the family, and I owe this completely to Allan Carlson, as the family declined in the United States once it stopped making stuff together. And in other words, we went from we had a model in our country of a productive households, and now we're consuming households. What is the ultimate difference between a homestead and a suburb is that on the homestead you make stuff, and in the suburb you buy stuff. It's a consuming unit versus a producing unit. The family has declined when we don't make things together, and if we just extend that very lightly and simply, the local economy also declines when we just don't make stuff together. And that could be music, firewood, all sorts of things. I don't mean that we have to, perhaps Joe did challenge us. The imagination, it's actually not that hard. In fact, when people say, well, homesteading, localism, it's all so impractical. I'm like, it's actually the most practical thing possible. I don't know anything more practical than the fact that that food comes out of dirt, right? It's the same argument that the teachings on contraception are impractical. Like, I guess all truth is impractical. I think actually the reason we don't do it is that it is practical. It's right in front of us, and it's not that hard, and that makes it uncomfortable, because I wish can just Jeff Bezos send me something in 2 days to make me feel better? But no, we just need to do those things together. And very often the father is the bridge that actually makes that occur within the household.
Well, good evening. I'm a chicken and duck farmer, but also a historian. So the title of my contribution to this book is Distributism, American Style, and I look at three individuals. I define distributism, and being an historian, I can use the old word, as a philosophy urging the widespread ownership of productive land, family-scale farming, artisanship, strong local economies, and significant household self-sufficiency. My chapter shows how distributism found fertile soil in North America during the 1930s. One strain of ideas and action was homegrown, and best exemplified in the work of Ralph Borsodi. It's spelled B-O-R-S-O-D-I. And I should note, in the spirit of Chesterton, that Borsodi beer is still a favored brand in Budapest, Hungary, from where his parents came. He was born in 1888 in New York City. He received no formal education. In contemporary terms, he was homeschooled. That happened back then. Among young Borsodi's mentors was Bolton Hall, the author of a book entitled A Little Land and a Living, which made the case for self-sufficient homesteads in the countryside. Following his father's example, Borsodi entered the burgeoning new fields of marketing and advertising. His prominent clients included the Macy's department store. However, he grew increasingly disillusioned with contemporary capitalism. In several books, he showed how large American corporations no longer sought to meet consumer needs. Instead, they worked to create needs and swell profits through emotional manipulation in advertising, through high-pressure marketing, and consumer debt. The consistent goal was to replace home production for use, such as home gardens, the keeping of chickens, and even maternal breastfeeding. These would be replaced by factory-made products. Indeed, one of Borsodi's central arguments was that power machinery was actually a true blessing to human life and liberty, yet a gift that was blighted by the rise of the central factories. As he summarized, against the family, the factory wages a ruthless war of extermination. Borsodi and his wife also discovered modern homeschooling. Pulling their boys out of the local school, they found that only 2 hours a day of coursework was necessary for their children to keep pace with their public school counterparts, opening up the rest of the day to a variety of activities. Building on these insights, Borsodi wrote books including Flight from the City and Prosperity and Security, laying out the arguments for a broad return to self-sufficient homesteads. The natural family, his term, would be the normal nucleus around which to build such a home. And yet there was a problem with Borsodi's otherwise solid thinking, a moral black hole. Not only was he an atheist, but militantly so. He did learn how to stop talking about this, though. A second or imported strain of distributism came from Herbert Agar, spelled A-G-A-R. He descended from an old Louisiana family with modern degrees from a New Jersey prep school and from Columbia and Princeton universities. During a sojourn in England, he turned his attention to analyzing American economic and political woes. As he later wrote, I had known for years that in some strange way the America I love was being strangled, and that it might not survive. But strangled by what? He found answers in the philosophy expounded by Hilaire Belloc and G.K. Chesterton, leading him to take on an editorial position at the latter's publication, G.K.'s Weekly. Their work, he said, first made it possible for me to recognize the enemy I wanted to fight. That enemy was finance capitalism, characterized by plutocrats and economic monopolies sustained by a corrupt politics. Agar believed that these forces had conspired to destroy free artisans and family farms, consolidating the ownership of land and other productive property into ever fewer hands. This turned owners into tenants, craftsmen into industrial slaves, and free society into the servile state. So far from providing freedom, Agar wrote, monopoly capitalism does not even desire it. Indeed, the meaning of freedom under the rule of the plutocrats had been inverted. In terms of labor, a workman had better be free from a home, because if he had a home, he would not be sufficiently mobile. Moreover, he had better be free from all family bonds. Above all, he had better be free from children. Instead of fretting over civilization, Agar, in the spirit of Chesterton, urged that first attention go to local cultures. As he wrote in arguably his best book, The Land of the Free, the country town is still rooted in the land about it. The relationship between town and countryside is still organic and healthy. Public policy should aim at the support of agrarian farmers, small-town merchants, and decentralized factories. Agar was not a believing Christian of any sort. All the same, he praised Roman Catholicism as a force for good. Where Protestant thought, notably that coming from the Episcopalians, tended to favor the concentration of ownership in a few hands and easy credit for the rich, the Catholic Church traditionally favors small property, hard money, and widely distributed ownership. These ideas actually lay behind the creation of a new journal entitled Free America. The editors were Ralph Borsodi and Herbert Agar, joined by Chauncey Stillman. Chauncey Stillman, a fascinating figure, born to a prominent New York banking family, an Episcopalian like all other banking families, but someone who became interested in what he called things Catholic. In the late 1930s, he helped launch the magazine Free America, and eventually would convert to Catholicism in the 1950s. But the magazine produced a splendid collection of distributist essays. They're collected in this book published by the Wethersfield Institute, which he founded with his fortune a little later on. I highly recommend it. It's for sale. I happen to edit it, so I think it's really a fine little book. But it's a great essay, a great insight into the power of distributist ideas in America in the 1930s and early 1940s. The third character in my chapter is John Rawe, R-A-W-E. Born and raised on a central Illinois farm, he attended St. Louis University, earning degrees in law. He also resolved to enter the Society of Jesus. In the early 1930s, he studied theology at St. Mary's Seminary in Kansas. And it was there that he joined what he would later call a zealous seminar of rural life advocates, turning him into the most vigorous American Catholic intellectual voice of the era for distributist and agrarian principles. Public policy, he resolved, should intervene to rebuild a truly democratic and humane order. As Rawe explained regarding agriculture, rich acres and productive plants are safe only in the hands of a small owner, a family man who can respect and cooperate with the laws of nature, make provisions for crop rotation, prevent erosion, and give paternal care to the plants and animals that feed and shelter him and his dear ones. Toward this end, Rawe also emphasized that families must reinvigorate themselves as productive units. Over a 10-year span, ending with his premature death in 1946, Rawe further developed such ideas in an important series of essays and books. In 1939, for example, he was the ghost author of A Manifesto on Rural Life, a rich and lively document issued by the bishops of Fargo and Bismarck, North Dakota. The next year, he co-authored the Summa of Catholic Agrarianism, Rural Roads to Security, America's Third Struggle for Freedom, where co-author Father Luigi Liguti focused on pastoral and educational matters. Raw wrote the more ideologically charged chapters. Indeed, through his forceful reconciliation of Catholicism with agrarianism, John Raw did resolve the most serious problems afflicting American distributists in the mid-20th century. Most directly, he showed how the arguments employed by the atheist Ralph Borsodi and the agnostic Herbert Agar actually gained power and clarity when reframed in an open Christian manner. John Raw also offered up an environmental ethic that displayed a welcome form of enchantment without descending into Druidism. Where others saw beauty and value in wild and scenic places, Father Raw focused on organic processes and temporal cycles, the cycles of time. For him, nature was not sacred. However, work in nature is sacramental. Probably his key argument, work in nature is sacramental. Centered on sky and soil, watching small parts of nature change through the seasons. In these ways, Father Raw's legacy may lie in a contemporary rediscovery of his distributist writings by young American Roman Catholics, searching for an agrarian environmentalism, an agrarian ethic fully compatible with their faith. Thank you.
All right. Well, of course, we don't have any time for discussion, but we will conclude, and then we'll go out there, and you're welcome to bring your heretical ideas to us out there, and we will quash them. But I do want to say this. Sophia Institute Press has done a really good job of putting this book together and marketing it. I gave a huge number of interviews to Catholic radio stations and podcasts. There was great interest in this book. And there were two kinds of interviews that happened. The one, especially for the Catholic radio stations, people obviously hadn't read the book at all. And so I'm explaining localism, and in every case, the interviewers are going, whoa, that sounds really good. It had never occurred to them before. This is just a completely new idea, that there's an alternative to the classic capitalism and socialism alternatives, that thinking that's the only one, that there's actually something else that's based on Catholic social teaching, and something that's immediately understandable when we start explaining it. And then the great thing about the people who had read the book is they pointed out that this was it's not a systematic treatment of localism. It's just coming at it from all different angles, as you four demonstrated in explaining your chapters. We get the historical stuff, truly practical, what fatherhood means, and then the poetic or dialogical approach, because that's the Q&A, and then a perfect example of how you have put localism to work in your own church, Father. And I will add one more thing that isn't in the book, but it came up in all the interviews. A perfect example of localism is what we've done with the Chesterton Academies. We've started these schools all around the country, started by local people, local families, and they've taken control of their children's education in a time when really probably the worst plague in our country right now is the damage being done in the public schools. And here's the solution, and it's a grassroots, ground-up solution, and we are implementing it. So, yeah, so we... So this, the different approaches in this book are all filled with immense truths. And this is a marvelous book to explain to others what Catholic social teaching is about and why it is, unfortunately, the most neglected thing in the church today. we can really make some changes to our society immediately where we are by starting to implement these ideas. All right. Thank you. We're going to join you out in the hall. We'll be back here at what time? 7? 8. 8 o'clock is when the troubadours come. All right. God bless.